Well, I'm not so sure if we know exactly what each team is trying to accomplish in this NFL offseason. Welcome back to another episode of Sports Talk with Hawk. I am Hawk, and we are now past day 3 of basically free agency being open. And I want to lay this out here. So in games like MLB The Show, NBA 2K, um, even some of the NCAA football games, not as much necessarily Madden, although there is kind of that sense with um, with picking how many wins that you project your team to be able to get in a season. So it's kind of there, but it's not the same. But there are labels. And those labels are either one of three things: rebuilding, long term development, or pursuing a championship. Those are normally the three. Sometimes there's more. I believe NBA 2K actually had 5 options because it was rebuilding and buying. So we're after players. Rebuilding and selling players, basically you're tanking. And they had different tiers to everything. In the NFL, last year the Houston Texans proved a major thing. That was, you can turn yourself around in 1 year. You can go from drafting second to drafting 22nd in 1 year. Because of that, I think there are multiple teams that have a skewed idea of what they can do. For example, the Tennessee Titans. This is the year to rebuild. You have 6 weeks left to complete your rebuild for the 2024 season. The 2025 draft is not half as deep. There are guys that will be drafted in the 3rd round this year that could have been potential top, probably late 1st round picks in 2025. That's how weak that draft is going to be. It's not a good one. The underclassmen came out. The entire landscape is shifting. They had all the new, we got the new conferences forming, conference realignment, and players wisely got out for year 1 of the mayhem. I think college football in and of itself is going to be really interesting. I think the quarterbacks will end up being there, not because they're the best players, but because they're the only ones you really end up watching because so many of the young receivers came out. A lot of underclassmen defensive players came out. So this is the year, this is the type of draft that you rebuild in. It's this one. But so let's continue on. The Tennessee Titans. I don't know what they're doing. I really don't. They still have Tajay Spears. They signed Tony Pollard. Very cheap deal. Well done. They signed Calvin Ridley. Danico Autry walks. They signed Lloyd Chesbury, the center. Much needed signing. Much needed. So they filled in some gaps. But they've lost a lot on the defensive side of the ball. Here's what they are saying right now. They have said Will Levis has this year to show he's the one that should be starting here. And no, I don't believe it's about wins. I think their defense is probably going to be the worst, if not bottom 3 of the NFL. I think Jeffrey Simmons could be moved still, and I would. The reality is the Tennessee Titans don't really have much of a short-term hope. And here's what I mean by that. The Texans are already doing what a rebuilding team needs to do. Year number 1, they went really heavy. They tore everything down. Traded Watson. Watt retires. Traded Hopkins away. They got rid of everything. They tore it all down. And then in one offseason, signed the coach, signed the quarterback, drafted him, draft receiver, sign an experienced receiver, Noah Brown, got a running back, Devin Singletary, and went out with an aggressive game plan as a young team and just played hard football. Can't fault them at all. They did it right. Jacksonville is now going, okay, we got to keep up with Houston. They used to have to keep up with the Colts. Jacksonville passed the Colts 3 years ago. 2 years ago, if you want to get technical. When they signed Doug Peterson and they switched around the front office and they started targeting players purposefully, they jumped the Colts. There's reports that the Colts are the front runners for L'Jarius Sneed. By the time you listen to this, maybe they made a move. Listen, I'm not giving you a first and a second round pick for L'Jarius Sneed. Is he better than the first round person I'll draft? Yeah. Do I think he's that great? Heck no. Heck no. I am very hesitant to give corners money like this. Because the system, Steve Spagnuolo, how they design it. Got to understand stuff like that. But the Tennessee Titans are giving a lot of interesting signals to which you get the feeling they're not actually trying to rebuild, but yet have to. Their offensive line absolutely stinks. Peter Skoronski, honestly, is the only one that was on that offensive line that was going to be starting this year. They get a brand new center. They're going to draft a left tackle. And honestly, if I'm Tennessee, I'm hoping Minnesota calls me. I ain't calling them. But I'm hoping Minnesota calls me and asks for my 7th pick. And I'll be like, sure. Sure. I want a 1st, and I want a 3rd, and I want a 3rd next year. Give yourself the extra ability. We're only talking about 4 spots with the Vikings. Only 4. So it's not going to be outrageous. It's 11-7. That move right there should be done. For a rebuilding team, that's a move that should be done. They still get their left tackle at pick number 11. They may, at 11, get offered a trade from the Raiders. If they think that Denver is going to draft Bo Nix and they feel that is their guy, leapfrog Denver, trade with Tennessee, you're only moving up 2 spots. But you're going to give me your 1st, and you're going to throw in a 4th. You're going to throw in a 3rd. To jump up those 2 spots. That's what a rebuilding team does. Those trades are what a rebuilding team does. It gets all the draft capital. It gets every opportunity in a deep draft to be able to go get players that can be on this team long term. I will say it again. Guys that are drafted in the 3rd round this year would be end of 1st round in 2025's draft. That's how shallow the draft is for 2025. You don't want a bunch of picks in 2025. Sell them. 2025 is not the year to rebuild. The 2 best players coming out are probably going to be Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. Quinn Ewers, the quarterback for Texas, is going to be there. Kyle McCord, the quarterback for Syracuse, going to be there. Will Rogers for Ohio State, going to be there. Dylan Gabriel, Oregon, definitely going to be there. Don't know what's going to happen with Michigan. Don't know what's going to happen with USC. Don't know what's going to happen with Washington. The reality is, at this point, you got to go all in. The Panthers, to me, number one, they lost the Brian Burns trade with that because of not getting a first. They lost it. Absolutely lost the trade. And traded to a team that wants to get out of the rebuilding stage. They are a buyer. They are rebuilding buyers. They had to let Saquon Barkley walk. You had to. I'm sorry. He doesn't have the offensive line in Philadelphia that Swift did last year. The defense looks scary. It's what you're hoping. Philadelphia's defense looks scary if they play to their potential. But right now, you go through the teams. The Giants are rebuilding, they're buying players. The trade for Brian Burns was a buy now type scenario. If they can go sign one of the remaining free agents to go along that line with them, you've got Dexter Lawrence and you've got Brian Burns now on that defensive front. And if you can go get a guy, go get a DJ Reader. If you can get a Jadeveon Clowney. If they could pull off a signing and get a Chase Young. I know there's a bunch of people that are calling him a bust. A bust? Listen, do you guys not remember what he did prior to the injuries? I'm sorry, to be a bust, you have to do nothing. You have to be Ryan Leaf. You have to be Bosworth. Mamula. Chase Young was part of a very lethal front four in Washington. Went through some injuries. If I'm him, I'm staying warm weather. I wouldn't go sign with the Giants. I really wouldn't. But they've got some options here. The Giants didn't lose the ability to rebuild. They still have their number one pick at 6. My guess is still going to be wide receiver for them. It's my guess. Malik Neighbors fits that offense. I like that pick. It makes sense. They've got Devin Singletary now as a running back. And I think they work well with it. Now let's flip. I've heard a lot of teams talking about a team that was on the verge of the playoffs as if they're going to absolutely suck this year. So I heard multiple places today go, so how bad are the Raiders actually going to be? Hold it. Hold on here. Hold it. The Raiders? Think about this just for a second. They know they cannot compete offensively with Kansas City or the Chargers. So what are they doing? Defense. Defensive line, to be exact. Their big splash was to get a guy who can take some pressure off of Max Crosby. The only way they can stay in the game is if they pressure the quarterback. Yeah, that looks like a good rebuilding plan to me. Now, they do not have a running back yet. This is where I'm wondering. J.K. Dobbins is still out there. Somebody will take a flyer on him. Honestly, I would love to see the Colts take a flyer. I know it's not going to happen. I would love to see the Colts take a flyer on J.K. Dobbins. His upside is through the roof. The injuries scare everybody. Duh. I mean, duh. But, right now you got A.J. Dillon, Alexander Madison, Ezekiel Elliott, and really, to be honest, I think maybe an A.J. Dillon fits the Raiders right now. Zamir White, I like him. I don't know if he's a lead back, but he could easily be part of a 1-2 punch. So that kind of bothers me. But you've got so many areas that they can improve still. The Raiders have the ability right now. They cut Garoppolo. They cut Hunter Renfrow. By the way, I hope my great idea right now is for the Bills to sign Hunter Renfrow. Excuse me. Excuse me. Ugh. But I think Josh Allen could really use a guy in the slot like Hunter Renfrow. I think he could revive his career. He's only 2 years, he's basically only a year removed from his 1,000-yard season. Like, give me a break. The guy is a very good slot option. Very good hands, smart. I think the Bills really need to go after Hunter Renfrow right now. Or they go after Michael Thomas. They can go after one of the injured guys, take a flyer because it's going to be an incentive-laden deal. Because their tag right now in Buffalo is rebuilding for a championship. They are rebuilding championship push. Everybody's talking about how the window is closed. They've got Josh Allen. Let them retool. Let them do what they have to do. If they make the trade of Stephon Diggs, I see this actually working out in their favor. At the end of the first round, they can get a wide receiver that is very comparable. They get a first-round pick from anybody early in the draft. They get a first-round pick from guys late. I've said this before. I will say it again. Arizona. Arizona needs Stephon Diggs to go with Marvin Harrison Jr. It's in the West. You don't care. It doesn't affect you. It affects the Seahawks and the Rams and the Niners. It doesn't affect you at all. Get that pick. Make that move to give yourself the ability to rebuild quicker. This is a great year for Jim Harbaugh. I said it. I said this in the offseason. You guys heard me say it multiple times. If you're going to rebuild, now is the time to do it. I would have fired Eberflus in Chicago. I would have immediately moved off in Arizona. I mean, with the coaches that are left available, please, somebody make sense of why Pete Carroll, Mike Vrabel, and Bill Belichick are not coaching this year. owners, GMs getting intimidated by guys who demand respect. Pete Carroll doesn't need personnel control, but you get an energetic coach for a team that has consistently underperformed. Consistently. There's reports that they are going to get offered, again, the same offer the Texans offered them last year from another team, sitting in the mid first round, which means Saints, Colts, Bengals, Seahawks, in that area. They're going to get offered the same offer that Houston offered them last year to get into that number 4 pick. If you make the trade for Stephon Diggs, see, yes, this is my GM hat I'm putting on. If you make the trade for Stephon Diggs, you're still going to draft a rookie receiver with your other pick that you get. Get Kyler Murray some weapons. But what if you give Kyler Murray an established receiver and a rookie receiver? That's just not Marvin Harrison. I like the way that things can play out. The Minnesota Vikings are another team that is kind of confusing. I've told you I don't see why they're trying to do a bunch of stuff. They are signing they're signing a lot of players to a 1-year deal, which to me looks like we need to be as competitive as possible. Yeah. What's your plan after that? Did Aaron Jones not want a multi-year deal? I ain't going to lie. I love the Pollard and Swift 3-year contracts. I do. I am not interested in signing players for a year most of the time. I don't know why so many 1-year deals are being signed. I really don't. But if you're the Vikings, they are bringing back Harrison Smith. They reworked the contract of a couple different players. They got Sam Darnold. They got Aaron Jones. Justin Jefferson, I know, is not really interested in what's happening in Minnesota right now. So here's where you've got to make the decision. So this is where you've got to make the decision. Where are you at now? Where are you at? The Denver Broncos, to me, are a tear-it-down tank type of team right now. Even if they draft Bo Nix, they're in a tear-it-down, build-it-up situation right now. And I think good for them. They've been trying to float, been trying to wade the water for so long. I think it's a tear it down, get draft picks. You know, they let Simmons go. They traded Judy, finally. Traded Judy. They got Russell Wilson out of there. They're keeping their young core, Javonte Williams, Patrick Surtain. You know, they didn't go after their free agents, you know, when free agency hit. Josie Jewell's gone. Okay? They know what they have to do, and they've got 2 years of outrageous dead cap money. And I mean outrageous. I still think Cortland Sutton could be moved. They can sign plenty of guys to a 1-year deal and save cap. So I'm not really sure what the Broncos' game plan is going to be, but my entire looking out at the concept right now is the Broncos are in a complete rebuild. They got all this dead cap money. They're strapped. They will be fourth in the AFC West. The Raiders will be third. Don't sleep on the Raiders being able to knock off the Chiefs at home. I said that when I did the schedule reveal, when I did the opponents. It makes sense. Something like that makes a lot of sense. Another thing you've got to look at is a team like the Washington Commanders. They also got Bobby Wagner now. They are rebuild, compete now. Not championship push, but they are in a rebuild, buy now, compete now mode. They're not interested in waiting around. This division truly is the weakest it's been in a while. The Cowboys lost their defensive coordinator. Mike Zimmer's now in. I don't know how that's going to work. He's not Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn really figured out how to play with personnel and matchups. And he went and got Dorrance Armstrong and brought him with him. He got Frankie Louvu. He got Bobby Wagner. Really, their secondary is the main place he's going to have to focus now. Got Jeremy Chin, safety. Looks good. They could have the turnaround the Texans did. They can draft second, turn around, and be fighting for the division lead at the end of the year. In fact, I expect them to. The Philadelphia Eagles are trying to buy relevancy. They spent so much money on players to try to keep themselves relevant. Overpaying for Saquon. Overpaid for Bryce Huff. They're trying to buy the division title and stay being one of the number one teams. We're going to find out if they can. We're going to find out if their coach is able to. The Eagles are in a championship push now, buy now, push now scenario. That's what they believe. The Commanders are in a buy now, compete now. The Cowboys think they're okay. They are the they are the epitome of a team that's neutral. The Giants are rebuilding. The Falcons are in a buy now, win now, compete mode. Buccaneers, the same thing. I think easily Buccaneers and Falcons, this could be a great battle between these two teams for the division win. I hope the Falcons and Buccaneers, I hope the NFL realizes this. I really do. Sometimes I really hope that the guys who put the schedule together actually have a feeling about what's going to happen in the league year. Because it should not be Atlanta versus New Orleans in Week 18 this year. It should be Atlanta versus Tampa Bay, potentially for the division win. And New Orleans versus Carolina, maybe for the worst one. I don't believe in New Orleans. I don't. I didn't believe in them last year. They're basically, they're re-signing their own guys. I don't like Dennis Allen as a coach. I think he's going to get fired. And it would actually probably make it a lot better on them if they just lost. Because then maybe, just maybe, you could get Deion Sanders to coach for you. Get Deion Sanders to coach for you. Then get Shedeur Sanders to be the quarterback for you. And you start looking up relatively quickly. Carolina Panthers, they got so many holes, they're completely rebuilding. They are in an everything mode. They are in a rebuild it all mode. They're buying, they're selling, they're trading, they're signing, they're releasing. Remember, there's a lot of bad contracts on that team. There were a lot of bad contracts on that team. They released them. They got some dead money because of it. Big deal. They're releasing them. They're moving on. They got 2 guards in free agency. Big. Very important. Protect Bryce Young. Very important. They need a running back. They got Bryce Young a receiver to throw to. Deontay Johnson. You already have Adam Thielen. It helps. You got Mingo out there. You got him a tight end already. Hayden Hurst is there. So it's not bad, but they're rebuilding everything. They got rid of Brian Burns. They released Chin. Frankie Louvu's gone. I'm impressed that Shaq Thompson is still there. Not going to lie. I am impressed that he was not traded as of right now. You got the Seahawks who want to be able to compete, and they want to compete quickly. They just don't have, I don't know, something's missing in Seattle. Mike Macdonald, I know, is going to try to make a move. If I'm Seattle, who do you go after? I'm thinking Jadeveon Clowney to Seattle makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. I think Devin White to Seattle makes a lot of sense. And then they're able to use the draft to be able to go after offensive line help or secondary. Mike Macdonald is going to love the idea of getting Cooper DeJean from Iowa. He's a safety / corner. He can play both. Arizona, you don't really know what they're going to do. They've got Kyler Murray. They've got a quarterback that can win. He can make the playoffs. He pouted. They cut the coach. Guess what? Wrong move. Now, Cliff Kingsbury always had an issue finishing the year. I've said that before. Closing out the year. But Dan Campbell still, even with the Lions winning, the Lions' Achilles heel is they can't shut down teams. They get a lead and they lose it. Right now, that is Dan Campbell's football team. And it has been ever since he took over. So you can't say, well, that's not that big of a deal. Oh, yes, it is. Because that's why they weren't in the Super Bowl. I said it during the preview weeks. That was going to kill them, and it did. Now, the Lions have been kind of quiet. I think they're letting free agency wind down. I know the fans are hoping they make a move or two trying to solidify what they have. I think a slot receiver like KJ Osborne or Tyler Boyd makes a lot of sense for the Lions. The Packers are young. It's an interesting move to go Josh Jacobs over Aaron Jones. I think Aaron Jones is better when healthy. Both of them have their injury issues. Maybe Jones was just tired of what was going on with Green Bay. It's very possible. The Chicago Bears is a very interesting one. Eberflus, in a sense, is coaching for his job. I don't think he is. I think he's going to be fired either way. Unless the Bears are going to be happy going 7-10 or 8-9. Listen, that defense is good. That defense is going to be good. Nothing's wrong with that defense. At all. How teams get labeled. Normally, about 9 out of 10, you're going to be accurate. You'll miss 3. You'll be wrong on 3 teams normally. The NBA, we know who's going to be aggressive. We know what's going to happen. MLB, we know who's going to try to go get players. The NFL is a little bit harder to predict, but normally you're only going to be wrong on 3. You'll be right 9 out of 10 times. The moves by the Titans, the moves by the Giants, the moves by the Panthers. Panthers make sense. They're overpaying to protect their quarterback. It makes sense. They have no first-round pick, and they got very limited draft capital. The Browns are trying to make some room because they have no draft capital. They've got to buy everybody in free agency. They have no draft capital. And on top of that, they traded for Jerry Jeudy, so now they got even less draft capital. So I'm not sure what the rebuilding teams are doing. The Texans are an anomaly. I don't think your expectation can be 1 year, turn it around, here we go. They got blessed by a division where the Colts are in it, Sorry, Colts are in it, and it helps you a lot. The Titans were in a year where Tannehill's old, Henry's old, lost their line. Okay. And Jacksonville, truthfully, what happened with Jacksonville was just it was only Trevor Lawrence getting injured. If he does not get injured versus Cincinnati, Houston doesn't win the division in the first place. They would still make the playoffs as the wild card. Steelers would have been out. So that is still accurate. They still would have made the playoffs. But you aren't going to win the division. But 2 years? Yeah. Yeah. So let's just pretend, okay, we're the Patriots or Washington. What's the expectation this year? What's the first stepping stone you want to reach year one? Spending money, being aggressive in free agency, going and getting guys. You're not signing guys to only 1-year deals. You're signing them to 3-year deals, 4-year deals. You're not being shallow in your aggression. What's your expectation year one? For both Washington and New England, 7 wins. You go 7-10, 8-9. Really, at that point, it's a success. Now, you can tell Washington feels they can get 11 or 12. They can't get 12. But they feel they could get 10 or 11. And they feel that 10 or 11 could win them the division this year. And they may not be wrong. They're in a better position to make a move like that and be a team like the Texans of 23 than the Patriots are. The Patriots have the Dolphins, the Jets, and the Bills, all of whom have quarterbacks that can win games. So for the Patriots, what is your expectation? 7 wins. For the Panthers, what's your expectation? 5 wins. Can you get 5 wins? 4 or 5 wins? Can we be competitive? Can we not get blown out the whole time? For the Raiders, what's your expectation? Really? Give me another 9-8 year. The Chargers are not going to be inept. The Chargers are going to be what the Chargers should have always been with Jim Harbaugh. They will be what they're supposed to be. And because of that fact, you cannot expect a huge drop. You're not the number 2 team in that division. That is the Chargers. Probably the Chiefs. I think Chargers are 1. And because of that, you don't have a ton of mounting expectations to put on a team that doesn't need to have mounting expectations. They win 9 games. They win 10 games. They're competitive. They're fun to watch. You've got to be happy when you get realistic results. That's it. That's what I'll say. Realistic results, you've got to be happy with. So 9 or 10 wins. It's all about where you're actually at. And I think being realistic is helping certain teams and being unrealistic is hurting other teams right now. All right, guys. Those are my thoughts on exactly what's happening with the free agency period right now. We've still got plenty of things that'll play itself out. A little bit longer of a podcast again. So we're going to drop it right here, but wanted to kind of just share the overview of thoughts of what's going on with the teams as we look ahead, because we still got the draft. Draft is 6 weeks away, and it's going to start ramping up here really quickly. And look for the trades to start happening a little bit earlier, because I think teams want to know what they're doing on draft night. All right, guys, that is it for me. I will see you guys tomorrow with another episode of Sports Talk with Hawk. I'm Hawk, and I'm out.